Hello, there we go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the stream. I am the baddest, and today we are going to be having a little chat. We're just going to be hanging out, doing some reading and responding, because 12 days ago, I asked you guys, what's your mascot slash indie horror hot take? And a decent amount of you guys responded. So I'm just going to go through them and respond to them and see what you guys are thinking and what you're all about. And we'll also have some chat engagement in this one. You guys can also have your own input on the take we're reading. But firstly, I think I should switch over to my hottest indie horror take, which is this big gal right here. Beautiful. My hottest indie horror take is probably my love for the Coffin of Annie and Lele. I don't think I have a hotter take than that, seeing as it's completely killed my career. I think that's my hottest take. If not, maybe, I don't know, what are some of my other hot takes? I would say my disliking of FNAF VR1 is a pretty hot take. People have relentlessly argued with me on that one. Otherwise, I don't know. I feel like I'm pretty basic. I get a lot of shit for my takes, but I feel like I'm actually pretty plain. Since this is going to be purely discussion, I think maybe we could pull up some music. I think I have the perfect thing. Wonder if I can find the same one I used before. It appears that I cannot. I was gonna do some Animal Crossing music, because we've done that before. How do I know if this is copyrighted or not, though? I guess I won't know. Alright. Alright, so we're gonna have some little background music while we talk about things. Alright. So yes, anyway, back to the subject at hand. I asked you guys what's your mascot slash indie horror hot take, and I haven't read through them. I thought about making a video on this, but I decided, nah, let's just go through them on stream, so that way you guys can also have a bit of input, if you want. We're just gonna go in order by top comments. And yeah, I guess let's get into it. An adult mascot horror game with more gore, disturbing elements, and an overall way darker approach would work perfectly, but companies are afraid to reinvent the wheel when the wheel already makes the big bucks. I don't think this is a hot take. I think people have been looking for this for quite some time. A more mature and adult approach to mascot horror. I mean, at the end of the day, I agree. I think that would just be interesting. I like dark and gritty approaches to the horror genre. So, you know, and I also love cool, cartoonish-like characters and plushy characters and characters that work good for marketing and that kind of thing. You know, I like both of those things. So, you know, a dark and more disturbing mascot horror game would be cool. Poppy Playtime nowadays comes a little close to that, but I think they could push it further. Bendy the Cage seems like it might be that. Bendy the Cage is going to be apparently rated M, I think they said. So, but it's probably going to deviate from the mascot part of mascot horror a little more. So I don't know if it's going to be exactly what this person is wanting, or what people that want this want. But yeah, I agree with this take, and I don't think it's a hot take. And yeah, I would be interested in seeing a more mature and adult mascot horror game. Developers and studios need to be so okay. Well, actually, before we move on to that, I just read the first take to you guys. You guys know what it is. Poll. First take. Do we agree or disagree? Okay, so agree is winning. Yeah, again, I think this is something a lot of people want. Clearly by the poll, some people don't necessarily want it. But, yeah, I think most people do want this. And, I think it would be interesting. I think it would be, a very good idea for mascot horror devs to kind of push the boat out further, be a little more daring. All right, now we can move on to the next one. Developers and studios need to not be so afraid to get gory and weird and stop marketing to kids and selling copious merch and trying to get #1 and just start making horror and marketing to an audience who will actually play and enjoy these games. I want to see more actual horror in these genres. Very similar to the first one. Except I'm not going to entirely agree because they didn't specify if this was about mascot horror, which it probably is, but they didn't specify that. So what I'm thinking is if you want more gory and disturbing horror games, you just need to look at the broader landscape of indie horror because you will find them. You will find that stuff. I do agree with the start marketing their games to an audience who will actually play them. Again, more so with the mascot horror genre, because it's a very common thing with mascot horror that people will only watch YouTube videos and stuff on it, and not so much engage with the actual content. Yeah, I don't entirely agree with this because I think if you look in the right places, you'll find exactly what you're looking for. But I don't entirely disagree because I think if you want to, if in like the mascot horror space, if that's what you're applying to this too, then I would agree. But what does the chat think? Okay, this one is more split. Maybe that's because of my personal explanation, or maybe you guys have your own reasons for that. It's more split. Yeah, again, I think this person can find what it is they're looking for. So that's why I somewhat disagree. Alright. Bendy is the only mascot horror I know that's managed to become a real video game. Bendy and the Dark Revival has actual mechanics and a coherent story, and the new game, The Cage, looks like it will be similar. Its overall world just feels the most fully fleshed out. I agree with the end of that, which is that the world feels the most fully fleshed out. I would agree with that. I would say that is the case. But Bendy is the only mascot horror that's managed to become a real video game. I disagree. I mean, you could make the argument that Poppy Playtime isn't finished, so it doesn't apply to that. But I would say Poppy Playtime is very much a real video game that is good. Five Nights at Freddy's has real video games that are good. And if we look back, you got games like Tattletale, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but Tattletale is very much a coherent game, which is pretty good. Shipwreck 64, more than a game, but still a complete game. I just wholeheartedly disagree with this one, although I am willing to give Bendy its props for being a standout mascot horror game, at least with the Dark Revival. I imagine you guys will agree with me on this one. I'll still ask, though. How do we feel about this take? That Bendy is the only mascot horror that's managed to become a real video game, and the new game looks just, and its overall world feels most fully fleshed out. Again, the latter of this is more agreeable than the former. So, you kind of given two takes here. One that's more, more agreeable. But, I would say we're discrediting a lot of existing mascot horror games with this take that I wholeheartedly disagree with. I have reviewed other mascot horror games very highly, so obviously I disagree with that. DDLC is probably one of the best indie horrors out there. Is this a hot take? I don't know. I don't know if this is a hot take. But I agree. I think it is a standout. It does so much to be incredible. And, I think, I think from art direction to music to writing to being different to being original and unique and stand out, I think all around it is one of the best for a variety of reasons. I mean, does anyone want to challenge me on that? If you vote disagree in this poll, I would love to know why. Disagree with the fact that it's the best indie horror? Well, it says one of. Like, I don't expect everyone to hold the same opinion that it is the best. A lot of people have their own number ones. But it says one of. And that, I think, is important to take into account. This one seems pretty divisive. Again, I would love to know why. I'll disagree because there are many other good indie horror games. I mean, sure, but are you disagreeing that this is one of the best? I mean, I guess you are, but I don't know. I think there are a lot of other good ones, but I think DDLC stands out as one of the best. But we can move on from that. Bendy is a better franchise than FNAF. Wholeheartedly disagree. Bendy has one good game. FNAF has 5+. FNAF started a whole movement with its existence. FNAF was much more original and distinct when it came out than Bendy was. Bendy's influence is nowhere near FNAF. Bendy just doesn't have the game catalog to back it up. Like, the Dark Revival is Bendy's only good game, and FNAF has better games than it. Into the Pit is a better game than Dark Revival. Help Wanted 2 is a better game than Dark Revival. And if we're being really pretentious, FNAF 1 is a better game than the Dark Revival. And with that being said, Dark Revival only has one good game. FNAF 4 may not be better than the Dark Revival, but it's a good game. FNAF 3, pretty good game. FNAF 6, pretty good game. The Dark Revival is a great game, and Bendy probably has great games to come. But Bendy, it doesn't have anything that FNAF has. It doesn't have, it doesn't have, it doesn't have the power of FNAF, but it also doesn't have the catalog. It doesn't have the influence. I would say it doesn't even, I'd also say, there's other things you could point out, it doesn't have the scares. Bendy is not a scary game, and FNAF has some scares. And also Bendy isn't, a cultural phenomenon. And that's not to say that makes something better or worse per se, but I mean the staying power of a franchise is telling of that game's impact, of that franchise's impact. And I don't think Bendy has that. It doesn't have better games going for it. It doesn't have staying power go for it. It doesn't have impact going for it in comparison to FNAF. So I wholeheartedly disagree, but chat, you're welcome to disagree with me. How are we feeling that Bendy is a better franchise than FNAF? Agree or disagree? Yeah, I assume people on this channel would disagree with that. Not that we love FNAF on this channel, but it's, again, just, FNAF is FNAF. It's, FNAF is, again, I won't say this makes it better or worse, but the cultural impact of Five Nights at Freddy's compared to Bendy is just, huge. Hang on, I want to read this chat. I guess that depends on what you consider to matter in a franchise. Do the early titles all count or only the current state? That is a fair point. If you look at the current state, I'd still give it to FNAF, because since the Dark Revival came out, we've had Into the Pit, we've had Help Wanted 2, both of which I would say are better, not to mention the whole film, and although The Cage looks fantastic, it isn't out. You can't say Bendy is in a better place than FNAF because of The Cage or anything related to it, because that game doesn't exist. That game could come out and suck. It's entirely possible. So no, I would still say current state, I would give it to FNAF, because games are coming out, and they're coming out high quality. So yeah, that's my stance on that. I have a pretty strong stance on that. Next up, I actually really enjoy mascot horror, despite not being scary anymore. I'm not here for the scares, I'm here for the convoluted stories and unfleshed out characters. I like being presented with something with a fun aesthetic and foundation, and inserting my interpretations. You know what? I think that's fair. I think that's valid. I, personally don't love how convoluted the stories get, and would appreciate some more depth to a lot of the characters. But I can still see where you're coming from. Huggy Wuggy I wouldn't describe as a fleshed out character, but do I still like him? Hell yeah. I understand not being there for the scares, but I do want my mascot horror games to be a little more scary. But at the same time, do I always want them to be scary? I don't know. I don't know. I've had fun with mascot horror games that I wouldn't deem scary, such as Bobby Playtime Chapter 2. I I would say I overall disagree with this take, but I don't blame you by any means for having this take. I don't think it's an invalid take. I'm interested to see where people lean with this one. So I'll read it again while the poll is up. I actually really enjoy mascot horror despite not being scary anymore. I'm not here for the scares. I'm here for the convoluted stories and unfleshed out characters. I like being presented with something with a fun aesthetic and foundation and inserting my interpretations. How do we feel about that take? For me, I disagree, but... Okay, we're actually seeing a lot of agrees. People seem to feel similarly to this person here, which is interesting. I can't really agree or disagree. This is what someone personally enjoys out of a piece of media. I don't really see why I should take away from that. Well, no, of course. But do you feel the same way or not? Is something you can answer. Like, I disagree because I don't feel the same way. Let me crack open an iced tea real quick. Alright, let's go to the next one. The horror of mascot horror will always feel limited. No matter how good a game can be, it will never be extremely scary. But I'd love to be proven wrong one day. I disagree. Unfortunately, I kind of agree that we haven't gotten one that's extremely scary. But I definitely disagree. I don't see why it can't be. I don't know. I kind of wish this person explained a little more of why. Because, you know, the mascot horror genre has horror in the name because it's built around horror. You know, it can be as if the person puts the effort into it, or if this is their goal, the creator of a mascot horror game, then you know, they can make them as scary as any other horror game. You know, like, I think if you took... It's a really scary mascot horror game. I don't know, maybe Outlast or The Mortuary Assistant. I think if you took those games and... I mean, you'd have to make them... They would be entirely new games at this point, but if you put them in a setting that fits mascot horror and incorporates some mascot horror characters, if you use the same scare tactics and have the same sort of general darkness and grittiness of it, that game can be just as scary. We haven't really seen that yet. You know, like, I can point out some mascot horror games that scared me. FNAF 1. A little bit of Poppy. A little bit. And, you could argue Tattletale is a little scary. Shipwrecked would definitely be scary. Would I describe Shipwrecked as extremely scary is the question. Could I dismantle this take with just Shipwrecked? I don't know. I'm not 100% sure on that or not. But regardless, I disagree. I would disagree. What are we on? Take 7? Okay, so, as I put up this poll, I will read it one more time. The horror of mascot horror will always feel limited. No matter how good a game can be, it will never be extremely scary. How do we feel about that take? Yeah, it seems like we're disagreeing. No, it's a little close to that. It's not that close. Yeah, I think we generally disagree over here. And I think we're mascot horror defenders over here. I think we look for the good in mascot horror and the bad because it's funny. But I think we're always looking for the good. So I think generally over here we would disagree with this one. The Hello Neighbor franchise, not a specific game, just the franchise in general, is overhated. I agree. I think only Hello Neighbor 1 is a truly bad game. Now, don't get me wrong. Hello Neighbor 1 is a really bad game. Like, it's so bad it's a contender for worst of all time. So I would never say Hello Neighbor 1 was overhated, because it is actually that bad. It deserved all the hate that it got. But what didn't, in my opinion, is Hello Neighbor 2, which granted was left unfinished, but I think the game itself is pretty decent. I think the puzzles are a lot better. I think the environments are much nicer. I think the characters are likable. And Hello Neighbor VR, pretty similar. I don't like the environments as much because it sticks to one household as opposed to a variety. I think Hello Neighbor VR was an enjoyable puzzle game. Secret Neighbor is a decent ASIM. It's certainly not the worst I've played. So that game is, like, as far as being multiplayer Hello Neighbor, Secret Neighbor's pretty alright. And then you got all the books and the cartoon, which is fantastic. The cartoon is borderline incredible. So, yeah, I would say Hello Neighbor as a franchise is borderline good. Like, Hello Neighbor as a franchise has, at this point, more good than bad. So, I would wholeheartedly agree with this, but I don't expect everyone to do so. Everyone, I'll put up the poll again. The Hello Neighbor franchise, not a specific game, just the franchise in general, is overhated. How do we feel about that? Alright, we mostly agree. Which I think is good. I think Hello Neighbor is a worthwhile franchise if you're willing to overlook how bad it started. So yeah, I agree with you guys on that one. Alright, we got some excitement from this person. I predicted that the purple guy was Crying Child's father when FNAF 4 first came out, and none of you can deny me my victory. Sure, it came about my cringy 10 or so ass saying photos of them as a family were in the box, but it's still a correct prediction, goddammit. That's not a hot take. That's just a thing that happened. That's an anecdote. Why are you here? The people who got mad at the concept of FNAF World should have paid more attention to what Cawthon had been making for the past 2 decades. Is this a hot take? Is this a take? I don't know. I mean, I disagree, actually. Because I like FNAF World. I think FNAF World is fun. I mean, sure, if you look at everything that came out before FNAF, you can understand how FNAF World would exist. But what came out before FNAF World is FNAF. When you get FNAF 1, 2, 3, 4 World, I can understand why it caused a little bit of outrage. I can understand why that would kind of make people be like, why the fuck did you make that? And also the first version of FNAF World is nowhere near as good as version 2. So, even though I like FNAF World, I would agree when FNAF World first came out, wasn't a great game. So, I guess I disagree. I mean, this isn't much of a take, but I'll still put up a poll. So I'll repeat it again. The people who got mad at the concept of FNAF World should have paid more attention to what content had been making for the past 2 decades. Agree or disagree, I guess? Yeah, I think we generally... No, we're very... Why are we so split on this one, chatters? Can someone explain? Those that... We're 50-50 on this. Can anyone explain... Can anyone say what they picked and why they picked it? Because again, this is a bit of a weird one. It's not much of a take. So I kind of just want to know if people are interpreting it differently. No one wants to speak up? This is like when I'm in class and someone asks, and then the teacher asks for someone to read their answer aloud. Agreed, it makes sort of sense. Do I think it makes FNAF World great? No, but a person's style informs what they make, so yeah. That's fair. But, at the same time, the FNAF series was on like a pretty hefty run at that point, and when you make a game within that series, you don't expect it to be so drastically different. Alright, well, yeah, again, we're pretty split on that one, which is interesting, but, we'll move on. Oh, this is a long one. Okay, we like a long one. I think my mascot horror hot take is that I'm kind of tired of mascot horror. I kind of miss the days where people were trying to capitalize on Amnesia, Slenderman, or the big horror names like Silent Hill and Resident Evil. There's only so many kids thing but evil you can do before there really isn't anything left. But if you want my actual mascot horror hot take, I want a mascot horror game that just isn't run through the area, solve easy puzzle, and get chased by the monster at the end. Horror games as a whole have so much potential. I don't want to just run from the monster. I want to feel like I'm engaged in both the story and gameplay. Come on a Souls game, Souls-like game, I think would be kind of interesting. A visual novel or Telltale-like game is where I think a mascot horror could easily shine, especially if you want to add so much lore to your story. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but that's just my hot take. Okay. Kind of got 2 here. We'll combine into 1, though. Let's summarize this as I'm kind of tired of mascot horror because I want a game that isn't run through the area, solve easy puzzle, and get chased by the monster at the end. And, yeah. I think we can kind of combine those into 2, where one is kind of causation for the other. I think you could summarize this as I'm kind of tired of mascot horror because I would like to see people switch it up and do something different and be more experimental with the genre, which at that point I would say is not a hot take. I guess you could say being tired of mascot horror is a hot take, but I don't know. I feel like a lot of people feel that way. A lot of people feel this way. This isn't that hot of a take. I will set up a poll for this. Again, I would summarize this take as I'm tired of mascot horror because devs aren't experimental enough with the genre. And I would say I generally agree. I'm not so much tired of mascot horror because I think we're still getting good ones. But, I mean, yeah, like you were saying, would I like a game that isn't so formulaic? Absolutely. Would I like a game that's Souls-like? I think that would be really cool. Would I like a game that's a visual novel or a Telltale game. Sure, I'd be down to see that. Yeah, I would say I agree with this take. So, yeah, shout out to you. Okay, we got another longer one. I think this one actually explains their take a little more, which I can appreciate, so let's get into it. FNAF was just as much of a blessing as it was a curse to Cawthon and mascot horror in general. On one hand, it's really good, but on the other hand, Scott had no idea what he was doing. He's not a genius writer, he's not a god, he's just a guy who has a talent for uncanny horror, and it shows in what can generously be called FNAF's story. I love FNAF, and it has changed my life for the better, but its story is borderline nonsense and has been since Sister Location. I'm happy that Scott was able to go literally from rags to riches on his last leg to one of the most successful game devs in the indie space, but the stories suck. And the aftershock of FNAF led to things like Ban Ban and Poppy Playtime and Hello Neighbor, which range from mid to dog shit. FNAF was amazing, and it still is. FNAF still has bangers, but the best thing for this franchise, lore-wise, and even still I haven't cared about lore since Absolute Disappointment that was FNAF Ruin, is to start a new storyline or start from the beginning. Okay, there's a lot of pieces to this, and I agree with some of it, I disagree with other parts of it. Immediately, I disagree with this. Was a curse to Cawthon? No, he's a millionaire. He's fine. I'm sure it's stressful sometimes, but I'd say it was purely a blessing to him. With that being said, okay. Story has been borderline nonsense at Sister Location. I mostly agree with that. The stories suck. I don't know. It's hard to say because we're at a point now where there's so many stories within FNAF. Like, yes, there is one continuous story that is all over the place and mostly nonsensical, but there is one long story. But there's also like a bunch of stories within it. It's like stories within, like mini stories within the games, but then also a whole book series and movie series now. There's so many mini stories or smaller stories within it, a lot of which I would say are great, but also a lot of which I would say are not. So I'm mixed on that. I don't know. This is where I hard disagree. The aftershock of FNAF lead to things like Ban Ban and Poppy Playtime and Hello Neighbor, which range from mid to dog shit. Oh my god, it's Rosie Sapphire music. Oh my god. The goat. Hello. How are you doing? For those of you that don't know, Rosie Sapphire music created various songs. They're a musician. And they did the one in control, the Doki Doki Literature Club song that I talked about in my second most recent video. Mascot horror songs that blow my mind or whatever. And I did a little simplistic analysis of it. Yeah, I completely disagree with this. Back to my point. Sorry, I also just got an email, so my brain shut off briefly. Yes, a game like Ban Ban is generally bad. A game like Hello Neighbor is generally bad. But essentially what you're saying here is the influence of FNAF led to mostly bad things. And that I wholeheartedly disagree with. Yes, FNAF has led to a lot of properties being inspired and creating subpar work. But the influence of FNAF is, like, I think an incredible thing. It influenced, like, a younger generation to become game devs. It bred a whole new genre that introduces, again, younger generations to the horror genre. I think FNAF being a perfect example of horror for younger audiences created a perfect aftershock, as they put it. It inspired devs to make games. Like, in so many ways, it inspired devs to make games. It inspired games that are named, and it inspired a whole genre of games that exist. But not to mention, it inspired the biggest community of fan games of all time, and it inspired so many artists to take their art more seriously. Like, Five Nights at Freddy's influence is part of what makes it so fantastic. Like, we were talking about this with Bendy versus FNAF earlier in another take. The reason Five Nights at Freddy's is so incredible is partially due to its influence. Like, that first game, sure, it's a great horror game on its own. But what that series continuing spawned is such a beautiful thing. And also, I think Ban, look, I've made thousands of dollars talking shit about Ban. But let's be honest about Ban for a second. Here's my hot take of the video. Ban is innocent. And what I mean by that is Ban is not a good game. But its existence and its success does not hurt anyone. Ban is a game that's played by people my age to make fun of it, and kids who genuinely enjoy it. And those kids that genuinely enjoy it are not hurting anyone. And much like with FNAF, Ban, I would say, has also had a positive influence as a game, because it did a similar, like, don't get me wrong, Ban influenced a lot of bad games. A lot of bad games to keep coming out. Which is unfortunate in a way. It's unfortunate in the sense that a lot of mediocre games are getting attention when great games aren't. That's the downside. But what Ban did, just like FNAF did 10 years prior, is it inspired younger developers to make games. Younger developers saw what Ban did, being a very simple horror game, you know, has purchased assets, basic characters, basic character designs, I mean, and kids saw that and said, I could do that. And don't get me wrong, some people who are older saw that and said, alright, I can make a quick buck. That's unfortunate. But younger kids, and I know this for a fact, we've talked about 12, 13-year-old developers on this channel who make mascot horror games. Ban influenced kids to say, I bet I could make a game. And that's awesome. I think that's great. So FNAF leading to Ban I see as a not negative thing. That's a very long-winded response to this take. I will now ask you guys for your take on it. How do I summarize this take? Let's focus on this. Let's focus on this. FNAF's influence was more negative than it was positive. That's the take, okay? FNAF's influence was more negative than it was positive. I want you guys to agree or disagree with that statement. FNAF's influence was more negative than it was positive. You may have just changed my mind on that. I might make a whole video out of that argument. That Ban's influence is not a purely negative thing. Because the fact that kids are looking at the simplicity of Ban and saying, I can make that, is awesome. Because they're starting their game development really early. And that gives them so much time to grow and develop. Like, I'm really grateful I started making videos so young. Because I learned a lot in not a short period of time, but in my early life. So now that I'm older, like say I go into university next year, which I might, you know, I might have a bit of a leg up over some people in some regards, being like independently working on media the way I have. So yeah, people generally disagree with that statement. I would too. You know, I'm going to end this poll, and I'm going to focus in, the next take will still be take 12, but I'm going to just put, very bluntly, FNAF's story sucks. Agree or disagree. And I'm not going to say my opinion on this. I want you guys to know the blunt statement of FNAF story sucks. Do we agree or disagree with that simply? Okay, we're pretty split. My take on that is complicated. I think FNAF as a story is bad. However, I think in a sense, it's also great. I think as a story, it's bad. But I think that something the FNAF story does is it engages its community in a way that's different than most media. And I think that's a generally positive thing. The way, like, you will not have people arguing about the story of a game like you do with FNAF. You will not have people conversing so directly about the story of FNAF or about the story of a game like you do with FNAF. Like, I think FNAF's story sucks, but it's also kind of like non-existent in a way. It's more of like a FNAF story is more of a community project that's always being worked on. And I think that's kind of a nice thing. But I would say as a story, it's bad. It is bad. Alright, let's finally move on. Okay. People take the entire concept way too seriously in terms of what should be done with it. I assume we're talking about mascot horror. If a game isn't for you, or you just as a whole don't properly jive with it, there's no reason to treat it like it's tarnishing not only the genre, but also gaming as a whole. Extra bit to add on. There is nothing wrong with creating merchandise for any property. No one is forcing you to buy it, and it does not strip from the property in question's experience it offers. It's literally like saying a content creator having an optional to support Patreon is wrong. Okay. Again, we kind of got two takes here. I agree and disagree. I mean, there's no reason to treat it like it's tarnishing not only the genre, but also gaming as a whole. I guess I agree with that. Like, if the game isn't doing that, don't say it is because you don't like it. But at the same time, we can be critical of media. You know, like, we don't have to be so harsh, but we can be critical of media. There's nothing wrong with that. And when it comes to the merch thing, I guess they're trying to say, like, you know, when Ban launched with its merchandise, there was nothing wrong with that. I think when a game or property launches with merchandise, it just shows a little bit of the intent. The intent is to capitalize off of whatever it's capitalizing off of. In the case of Ban, it was mascot horror. And although I was just talking about Ban being innocent, I would say that is one place where it was not innocent. I think Ban was made with the intention of capitalizing on mascot horror, and I think launching the game with merchandise shows that, and I would say it's morally questionable. I won't use the word wrong, but it's questionable. Let's focus on the second half here. Okay, so when it comes to the FNAF story sucks, people generally disagree, which is a little interesting. But, that's fine. So we're on take 12. agree or disagree. I will read it again. There is nothing wrong with creating merchandise for any property. No one is forcing you to buy it, and it does not strip from the property. Okay, I don't entirely know what this means. There's nothing... When a game launches, it's okay for it to have merchandise. That's the take. And for me, I think I would say, honestly, I would say agree, because I think it depends on this is going to sound a little harsh, but I think it depends on the quality of the product. And by that I mean, I'm just going to say this straight up. Again, I was defending the Euphoric Brothers earlier. I think I've earned some criticism of them. The Euphoric Brothers knew when Garten of Banban 1 came out that it was not a good game. They had to have known that. There is no way they didn't know that. They obviously knew that. So when they made merchandise for it, they knew they were capitalizing off of something that was slop-like and would get attention. But a game like, I don't know if this one launched with merchandise, I don't remember, but we'll say another game that only has one game, we'll say Finding Frankie or Indigo Park. Both of those games spent way longer in development and delivered a certain level of quality to the people that played the game. And that is why I think it is okay to have merchandise. Poppy Playtime is a gray area for sure. That's an interesting one. Because as far as quality goes, it has it. But Chapter 1 alone, I guess if I'm giving it to Indigo Park, I gotta give it to Poppy Playtime. Anyway, yeah, I agree with the sentiment. I just think there are exceptions. That would be my take. Garten of Banban is a perfectly serviceable video game series. Let's look up the definition of serviceable, just so I don't say this wrong. Fulfilling its function adequately, or usable. I guess its function would be to be a video game. And yes, and by using that definition, it is usable, it is functional, hardly, but still. So yes, by that definition, we can call it serviceable. But being serious here, let's say serviceable video game series means to deliver a quality video game. A game that one can play and enjoy. And I disagree with that sentiment. I disagree with that idea. Garten of Banban, look, I've defended it in this very stream, and I'll defend it again. I think it's a fine, silly game for kids. That I think is fine. But with that being said, games made for kids have turned out a lot fucking better than this. I think Banban is a bad series. I don't think they've made a good game. I guess you could argue they've made passable games, or at least close to passable games. But, yeah, I just have to completely disagree with that idea that Garten of Banban is a serviceable video game series. I think, I think it falls flat in just about every regard. I guess a compliment I could give it is that it has memorable characters despite their designs being very simplistic. That's something I could give it, I guess. But yeah. I disagree. I have to completely disagree. I think to some extent Jumbo Josh could be the most powerful mascot horror character ever. I mean, maybe. We've seen him take on pretty much the whole Banban cast and defeat them. But I mean, could he beat Huggy Wuggy in a fight? I don't know. Could he beat the Ink Demon in a fight? People always say the Ink Demon, like, solos, like Huggy Wuggy or Jumbo Josh. Have you seen that fucker's legs? Just go for his legs, and you're so clear. Like, I almost feel like I could beat the fucking Ink Demon, because his legs are so pitiful. Like, all you gotta do is take out his legs, and he can't fucking move. But yeah, I don't know. Jumbo Josh, Huggy Wuggy, Ink Demon, those would be like the powerful mascot horror characters. Maybe fighting Frankie, or Frankie, whatever the character's name, whatever the phone and the bunny in a box character. Yeah, I don't know who I would determine the most. Uh, I don't know who I would call the most powerful mascot horror character. I don't know. All right, in no particular order. Okay. Oh wait, no, I didn't run a poll on if Jumbo Josh was. Did I even run a poll on the Band series? Fuck, I haven't been running polls. Yeah, the last one was the merch one. Okay. Okay, I'll start copy and pasting the. Okay. Guardian is a perfectly searchable video game series. Do we agree or disagree? And if anyone says agree, I would like to know why. This one is very split. Okay, okay, it's less split now. No, it's very split. Why is this one so split? Are we memeing? Or in being playable agree? Okay, if that's how we're answering it, then sure. Interesting, okay. Because it's a kid's form of mascot horror? Sure. Okay, and now the Jumbo Josh one. Jumbo Josh could be the most powerful mascot horror character ever. How do we feel about that? Okay. We're somewhat split on it, but agree wins. He is pretty big. That's a good point. He is pretty big. Alright, let's move on. Poppy Playtime is a completely fine to good horror game, and people were only so critical of it when it first released because of the general growing fatigue when it comes to mascot horror due to its oversaturation. No. I wholeheartedly disagree. I agree that it's a fine to good game, but mascot horror was not oversaturated when Poppy Playtime came out. Poppy Playtime, if anything, caused the saturation, even more so than Ban Ban. Like, when I try to think of games that came out around the time of Poppy Playtime or beforehand, I can't fucking come up with anything. I like fucking Hide Time came out inspired by Poppy Playtime, and that game was bad. Coming up before Poppy Playtime though, there's very little. So yeah, I think this is just incorrect information. I don't think this is a take. I think this is a mistelling of historical events. But I'll still run the poll. Poppy Playtime is clearly find a good horror game. I wasn't critical of it. Okay, I will change this to Poppy Playtime is completely fine, and people were only critical of it due to mascot horror oversaturate. Damn it, that's just a little too long. Saturation. Oh, wait, there's more. Oh, there's more. My bad. The game itself doesn't pair into kids any more than any other mascot horror game does, and if it would Betty swap, if it and Betty swap dates, the reception would also completely change for both. Don't know if I agree with that. I think the same could also be said if we saw Benny's release with Bands, considering how rough Benny and the Ink Machine's earliest builds were, but I also don't fully believe this, so take us with this last addendum lightly. Okay, that doesn't really change the poll, though, so we'll leave the poll the same. Yeah, I wholeheartedly disagree with all this. I think, Bendy, when it came out, didn't cost money. That's a big thing. And it didn't launch with merchandise. That's another thing that we talked about earlier. And it didn't have the history of Mob Entertainment being a cringy kids channel. That was I'm not saying that from me, I'm saying that was the reputation. Like, I think, like, as much as I think Poppy Chapter 1 and Bendy Chapter 1 are comparable, I think people would have immediately respected Bendy more for being more stylistically what's the word I'm looking for? I lost it, whatever. More stylistically distinct. You know, Poppy Playtime looks pretty great, but it doesn't have the artistic charm of Bendy per se. And so yeah, I disagree that if Poppy and Bendy swapped dates, their reception would completely change for both. I don't agree with that at all. Do I agree that if Poppy came out when Bendy did, it would have been received better? More than likely, because our standards for horror games were just a little lower back then, and especially indie games. Like, indie games around 2017 were, yeah, I mean, Cuphead had come out around the same time, and, you know, Super Meat Boy had been out for years, Shovel Knight had been out for years, but still, our Outlast had been out for years, but our expectations were still just lower. So, yeah, and same goes for the Bendy and Bam thing. Again, I think Bendy's artistic quality is enough for it to be received significantly better than Ban. So yeah, I disagree with this all around, and you guys seem to generally agree with me. Okay, we got another longer one. Okay. I don't like when people call games like Buckshot Roulette horror games. I know horror is inherently subjective, but generally the goal of a horror game is one to actively and intentionally make the player as scared and anxious as possible. Which, to be fair, Buckshot does do that, but in a completely different way than an actual horror game. If we were to count Buckshot as a horror game, then really any game with low poly and slightly dark lighting would also count as a horror game. Okay, just so you know, you don't need to put an for horror. If you squint hard enough at them, I know it's not a big deal, just kind of a pet peeve of mine. Part of me agrees because I don't find Buckshot that scary. But at the same time, I think I generally disagree just because I think Buckshot goes for a different style of horror where tension building and suspense is the emphasis. And I think that type of horror is still horror. So, I don't know. I get this one. I get this one a whole lot more than I get the first one. So, you know, I get it, but I think I disagree. Alright, polls up. How do we feel? Okay, we were pretty split for a second there, but then we were perfectly split for a second there, but then disagree carried it away. Yeah, I disagree. I think Buckshot is trying to scare the player using suspense. So, you know, I would disagree, but I get this one. I can understand this one. All right, is this the last one? Nope. Jesus Christ. Oh my God. Okay, we're not doing all these. This is the last one we're reading from this person. Spooky's Jumpscare Mansion does not count as a mascot horror game. Yeah, it does have some cutesy characters, but the whole point is that the game presents itself as this goofy parody and then increasingly gets scarier the further you get into it. Most of its monsters, with a few exceptions, aren't subversions of a child-friendly concept, aren't mascots either in-universe or outside, or they generally aren't marketable in the traditional sense / kid-friendly. No matter what you think a horror game needs to be considered a mascot horror game, I don't think Spooky's counts as one. I'm very mixed on this one. Part of me considers Spooky's a mascot horror game, not even because of the monsters that you encounter, but because of Spooky herself. Like, Spooky herself, big mascot horror vibes. But at the same time, is Spooky's a mascot horror game? Nah. Yeah, this is what I have to think about quite a bit. Overall, I think I'm going to agree with the take being Spooky's Jumpscare Mansion does not count as a mascot horror game. I think I agree with that. I would love to hear arguments on either side of this one. If anyone in chat that's voting wants to speak up, we're pretty split on this one right now. If anyone in chat wants to speak up about why they chose what they chose, I'd be interested to hear. I'd be interested to hear either side of that argument, because again, I'm pretty evenly split on it. It appears no one would like to speak up. Oh. It has the general vibes of mascot horror. I don't subscribe to arbitrary definitions. Okay. Alright. It still technically counts as a horror game if it tries to scare the player, but it fails, so I don't know how to count it. I think we're talking about Buckshot in that. Yeah, I don't know. I'm pretty evenly split on this one. It might be easier to just say Spooky's, to a technical degree, has mascot horror elements, but it probably isn't a mascot horror game. Alright, we're going to move on to someone else. Alright. Too much gets lumped in with mascot horror. DDLC is not mascot horror. Mouthwashing is not mascot horror. Mascot horror is practically defined by its setting and antagonists mainly as X thing from your childhood, but now it's spooky. Mascot horror, as a definition, needs to be way tighter considering the average level of quality in these games. Putting DDLC in the same category as Roblox Schlock of the Week, number 117, is insulting to the clear effort put into it. It's not about the pure quality, it's about how way too much can be considered a mascot. You had me and then you lost me. I agree too much gets lumped in with mascot horror, and I agree that DDLC and mouthwashing are not mascot horror. But then you try to get on this kind of high horse argument of putting DDLC in the same category as Roblox Lock of the Week, or mascot horror as a definition to be way tighter considering the average level quality in these games. That's stupid. We do not define genres by their quality. That's just objectively wrong and a really dumb thing to say. So I mean, I agree. Too much gets lumped into the mascot horror. I will call that the take, and I will agree with it. However, the idea that that definition needs to be tighter because of quality is, again, just dumb. That's not how we make definitions. That's not what definitions are. I do agree with that. Mouthwashing doesn't have the vibes of mascot horror. It's just popular. Well, that's not why they said that. What's the mascot? I don't remember. Yeah, mouthwashing has a mascot. That's why this was brought up. Why is this image so small? The game has a mascot. That's why it was brought up. Okay, this is our strongest agree up to this point. So, yeah, that's fair. Cool. Retro slash PlayStation era graphic indie horror games playing out the same way every time is getting stale, mostly with the concept of the player character doing a mundane job like a cashier, a landlord, taxi delivery driver, etc., and the monster or killer shows up after a bit of exploring or a set number of conditions are met. The devs could use something to spice up the allure of these games, like, for example, using what Eternal Darkness did with the sanity mechanic, which made the game inflict effects that messes with the player controlling the game in various ways. That does sound interesting. I'll check it out. And I do somewhat agree. But I think what this person is somewhat missing is that those games are... The games this person is thinking of are retro era graphic style second to being slasher games. The games that this person is describing are slasher games that purposely follow the slasher formula, the traditional, basic, almost stereotypical slasher formula, and that I think is cool. I love those games. I think it's really interesting, and I think those games are actually pretty scary. Those games stand out to me as being scarier than most. Games like Murder House, games like Rewind or Die. Yeah, I agree that we need, I think, we need more retro PS1 era graphic games that do different things, because I love that style, and I do think that style could be, I do think that style could be used more for, good games. But at the same time, it is still used outside of the slasher genre. Like Crow Country was meant to be like a early PlayStation era survival horror game, and it's great. It's one of the best indie horrors of that year. So yeah, I generally agree, but again, I do think this person is missing that the games they are looking at, the games that they are referring to, are specifically like in the slasher games genre, like the puppet combo kind of subgenre of indie horror. How do we feel about this take? Retro / PS1 era graphic indie horror games playing out the same way every time is getting stale. I disagree because I like those games, but I don't blame them for having that opinion. Yeah, okay, we're hard disagreeing with this one, apparently. I thought it would be a little more split. Okay, moving on. Without a nostalgic or historical influence, mascot creatures become mid. I'm not entirely sure what that means. I guess they're saying... without appealing to the nostalgic factor or incorporating some sort of historical, some kind of history to the character becomes mediocre. I guess is what they're saying. I guess I agree. Like, Bendy's whole appeal is old cartoons. FNAF's whole appeal is old Chuck E. Cheese style restaurants. Poppy's whole appeal is toys that were popular at the time the game takes place in. Or at the time the toys were supposed to be made in universe. What is Ban? Yeah, Ban, this person would probably say falls into the category of that's why they're mid. Because mascots for a kindergarten? Really? Yeah, I guess I mostly agree, weirdly enough. To anyone that disagrees with this, let me know. Because I can't really think of, like, a way this wouldn't be true. I don't think most people these days feel nostalgia for 1920s cartoons in Bendy's case, though. That is true. But I think the younger generation finds older stuff just inherently creepier. Which, to be fair, in a lot of ways it is. If you watch some, what's the studio I'm thinking of? 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 Fleischer Studios. Is that what it is? Fleischer Studios, is that how you say that? If you look at some of those old cartoons, they're kind of freaky. And I don't think people found them freaky at the time. So, you know, there's kind of that, not necessarily nostalgic, but historical factor. Yeah, I generally agree with this one. Let's move on. Poppy Chapter 4 is not a bad chapter, just had bad marketing with its characters. That is part of it. Bad marketing with its characters, but also just a shaky launch. A lot of content was added over time, and a lot of bugs were fixed over time. In a pretty short period of time, to be fair. Like, some people... okay, I'm going to go on a little tangent here. Some people try to compare Poppy Chapter 4 and Security Breach, and if you think that's a valid comparison, you are regarded. Because, one, the amount of bugs is so not comparable. Secondly, the amount of time it took to fix Security Breach to be in a decent state is astronomical. Whereas Poppy Chapter 4 was fixed up pretty quickly. A lot of people say, oh man, Poppy Chapter 4 is so buggy. It was just buggy on launch, which is bad. That's really bad. But if you play it now, you're not going to encounter any bugs. That game was fixed quickly. But with that being said, Poppy Chapter 4 was still reviewed negatively because it was buggy. And that's still bad. That's still a bad thing. So that's not like... I disagree that that's just what the problem with it. Yeah, that's not the only problem it had. But I agree that Poppy Chapter 4 is not a bad chapter. Do I think it's a great one? No. Do I think it holds up to the one before it? No. But it's a good one. It's good. So I'm going to change this to Poppy Chapter 4 is not a bad chapter. And see what you guys feel about that. Because the why is a little misguided, but not so much a part of their argument. Alright, it seems like we mostly agree. 123 Slaughter Me Street 1999 is the best mascot horror game ever made from a gameplay standpoint. It's not just a walking sim, and it's fun. When it comes to story, the best is probably Bendy and the Ink Machine. It could have been FNAF if the story didn't fall off after UCN. Well, I immediately disagree that Slaughter Machine 1999 is the best mascot horror game from a gameplay standpoint. I think it's a great one, but you know, I'd rather, even from a gameplay perspective, I'd rather play, say, The Dark Revival or FNAF Into the Pit, or FNAF. What was I gonna say? Help Wanted 2, or even Help. Sorry, not Help Wanted. FNAF 4. I think I'd rather play FNAF 4. You know, Slaughter Me Street 1999 was a good game. It's definitely the best Slaughter Me Street game. It was a good game. I liked it. It's a hard game. It's a challenging game. It's good. Yeah, Shipwrecked in My Friendly Neighborhood. Yeah, those are other good examples. So yeah, I disagree. I'll just put this as the take. Yeah, so we agree that Poppy Chapter 4 was not a bad chapter. How do we feel about this? Don't vote on this if you don't want to, because a lot of you probably don't even know what Slaughter Me Street 1999 is. Like, a lot of you probably don't know that Slaughter Me Street is still making games. Okay, we fully disagree, but a lot of people aren't voting because, again, you probably don't know what this game even is. When it comes to the story one, I just realized I've gone this long without mentioning Burger Farm. That's a game with way better gameplay. Burger Farm might be my answer for the best mascot horror game from a gameplay perspective. Let's just move on to the next one. Alright, we got a spicy take. We got two spicy takes. It's an abhorrent genre with the founding principles of taking advantage of children developing neurochemistry for a quick buck. Anyone with self-respect has stopped paying attention to the genre years ago. Yeah, that's just mean. That's just mean to people that have a certain interest. I think, like, I don't know, I'm 20 and I'm still playing mascot horror games. That's just mean. I don't even want to run a poll on that one. I think that's just mean. So, I disagree. I think the DLC is trying to be about way too many things, leading to none of those themes actually sticking. You could cut the runtime in half and not lose much. Slay the Princess is better in every category by a country mile. I think the comparison here is stupid. I think Slay the Princess and Doki Doki do very different things. So to say that it's better in every category by a country mile is just dumb. Because Slay the Princess does entirely different things. It's better in every category. Okay, is it better in fourth wall breaks? Is it better in interacting with files on your computer? Is it better in poetry? Like, is it better in jump scares? No. Like, they do entirely different things. So that's just a bad comparison. But anyway, we'll stick to the main point here. DDLC is trying to do a way to read things, leading to none of those themes actually sticking. I don't know. They stuck with me like fucking glue. I mean, you guys know I love this game. This guy is just a dumbass. I'm kind of inclined to agree based on the entirety of this comment. Based on just this alone, this is just an opinion. This is just an experience with the games that I can't take away from them. Based on this and all of this, I think this person might just be a little special. But, yeah, DDLC is about trying... I don't know. DDLC isn't about that many things. And the incredible thing about DDLC is that everything that it is about is perfectly separated into different characters and different scenes. So you can dissect everything that the game is about individually. It's not like a bunch of things are happening at the same time. Like, for example, all the poems have meaning. You can dissect the poems individually. The characters have different stories and elements to their characters and their designs. You can dissect those individually. I don't know. There's just, I don't know. I hard disagree. I will make this the take that this person, that will respond to from this person, because it's the least unlikable part of them. I think we all disagree with this, yeah. And I think we all just dislike this person a little bit. Alright, mouthwashing. Mouthwashing had a good message on release, but the treatment of the game and its characters afterwards has diminished the message by marketing all of the wrong aspects for merchandise. Also, I don't think it was actually scary. Well, whether or not mouthwashing is scary, I think is a side point. I don't think we even need to respond to that. Yeah, I mean, I've spoken about this before as well. I think Mouthwashing is a pretty great game that has, like, a lot of good content in it and a lot of, like, themes and messages to share. But I think the treatment of the game by the developers is kind of off. I think it's just weird. Like, I don't know what other word to use. It's weird. I think it's really weird how they treat their own game and how they treat their characters. And I do think it has diminished the quality of the message that they wanted to share. So yeah, I agree with this one. Alright. How do we feel about this take? Mouthwashing had a good message, but the treatment of the game afterwards has diminished the message. I have not played DLC at that point. I don't even like bothering with that because I already know that I haven't since I was fun today. I don't know what we're talking about. Yeah, I think we mostly agree with this one as well. Because, yeah, the devs of this game are fucking weird. I don't know, they're just weird. FNAF's lore is genuinely terrible. The fact they couldn't tell a coherent story until maybe Secret of the Mimic is absurd. Most of the theories are based off of fucking breadcrumbs. Well, I disagree with they couldn't tell a coherent story until maybe Secret of the Mimic. Because, like, if we're talking about coherent stories within the games themselves as, like a story within the game itself, and not including content from outside sources. Like, you could argue 4, 5, and 6 kind of do that as well. But yeah, we've already talked about how FNAF's lore is terrible, so I think we can skip over this one. Little Nightmares 3 is good. I wouldn't know, because I haven't played it. But I have heard otherwise. I see why this is here, because it probably is a bit of a hot take. Because I've heard, it's not that good. So, yeah, sorry I can't really respond to that. I'll still run the poll, though, in case anyone in chat has played the game. We can do that. We're getting very little engagement with this one, so I assume most people haven't played the game. It is pretty new. Vending Machine is the best, and SCP Containment Breach is also fun. I feel like we've talked about Bendy enough, and I don't know enough about SCP Containment Breach, so I'm going to skip over that one. What the fuck does this mean? Okay, I'm having a stroke. What the fuck? Bendy needs to get as much pizza as it needs, and so does DDLC and Circus of Tim Tim, because what they share in common is their love for pizza. Bendy deserves a pepperoni pizza, DDLC deserves a pizza tower, and Circus of Tim Tim deserves pineapple on pizza. Happy, happy, happy. I agree. Hell Neighbor 1 is not that bad. We went over this. It is. It is that bad. Hello Neighbor 1 is deplorable. It is a game that was intentionally designed to be beaten using a fucking, like, IGN tutorial. And it's so nothing. Hello Neighbor 1 is video essay type of bad. Yes, there's been many a video essay on Hello Neighbor 1. Yeah, I hard disagree with this one. Hello Neighbor 1 is that bad. It's a game I never want to play again. It's a game that's not worth playing. Yeah, I guess we'll run a poll, but I think I know what the results are going to be for this one. This is clearly someone who's never played Hello Neighbor. That's possible. That is possible. Hang on, we got someone who said agree. Does the Hello Neighbor defender want to speak out? I never played it. Are you the one who said agree? Alright, we can move on. I don't think most of these games should be marketed towards children or reviewed by them as a majority. Yeah, but they're going to be. You know what I mean? Like, this isn't really worth talking about. Like, would I agree with this statement on paper? Probably. Like, as much as these games try to appeal to kids, do I think Poppy Playtime is good for a child? No, I don't think so. Maybe Chapter 1's fine, maybe even Chapter 2, but then I would say no. Hey, do I think the first FNAF should have been popular with kids? Not necessarily, but it was. You know, it's spooky thing on the internet that also has like a childlike element to it. It's gonna catch their attention, and they're going to. Is it inherently bad for kids to be paying attention to that stuff? Yes, I would say yes. Um, there's a reason we hide or try to avoid sharing graphic media with children. It's because it influences them in negative ways. But you know, it's just the internet age. That's just how things are, and there's not a whole lot we can do about it. I think parents should do a little more. I think parents should do more about what their kids do and do not engage with. But yeah. Poppy Playtime Chapter 3 wasn't good. Everyone's standards were just a rock bottom because we got roughly one good mascot horror game every 3 years. I wholeheartedly disagree. I think everything about Poppy Chapter 3 was pretty great. My standards were not really low at the time. In fact, my standards for Poppy were pretty high because this game looked like it was going to be good. And Poppy Playtime, although Chapter 2 had come out since... No, it hadn't. Yes, it had. Chapter 2 had come out since. Poppy Playtime was now rivaling the Dark Revival. So it had to compete with that. Because, like, Poppy versus Bendy is, like, a common conversation. Yeah, I think Poppy Chapter 3 was genuinely just really good. I think it was fun to play. I think it was pretty scary. I think it introduced enough of interesting ideas. And I think it continued the story in a valuable way. So, I disagree. But what do you guys think? Okay, we do agree that Hello Neighbor 1 was that bad. Okay, we're disagreeing. We're agreeing the Poppy Chapter 3 was good. A couple people disagree, though. Or a couple people agree that it's not good. Alright, let's move on. There's just too much ironical, I think you meant to just say ironic, attention that's given to bad games. The most common example is Ban, and that's how those games make a profit. They do not deserve the attention, no matter if it's just to laugh at them or not. I'm very mixed on this, and I've been mixed on this ever since I started covering these bad games. I think completely disagree with Ban. Ban was making money anyway. That is true. Ban was going to make money regardless. However, we did make it worse. But, yeah, I would say these games are going to make money anyway. And also, I would say, I think the problem is when bad games overshadow good games. That is a problem that happens, I would say. But, like I was saying with Ban earlier, why is it such a big deal if these games get popularity, you know? Like, I guess because it encourages developers to not try as hard, or it encourages developers to make slop, or it encourages studios to make bad games, or simplistic bad games, that can still earn a profit. Yeah, that's true. But, you know, most of these games are pretty innocent and just either trying to make a quick buck or just genuinely someone trying and they just don't have the skill set. Name me a popular mascot horror game that got away with ironic attention like how Ban did. See, that's a good point. Because nothing compares to that. Absolutely nothing compares to that. But you could argue Let's Players cover a lot of slop games that and there's a lot of games following Ban that devs covered, that creators covered, that probably didn't deserve it, like Muzi, Joyville, Playtown. You know, these were all games that, myself included, creators covered that didn't necessarily deserve that coverage. But you are right. Nothing has gotten to the level of Ban, and nothing probably ever will. So yeah, I mostly disagree for that reason. Wasn't the Sparky's game inspired by Ban? I'm sure it was. Alright, how do we feel about this take here? Poll going up in chat. Too much ironic attention is given to bad games, and that's how those games make a profit. Again, I'm still a little mixed on it. But I would say I would overall say I disagree. But I'm a little mixed on it. Because here's the thing. Like I said earlier, by giving so much attention to these bad games, we overshadow attention to good games. Like, I want you to think about how much attention Garden of Ban 1 got in comparison to Bendy and the Dark Revival. Ban fucking swept Bendy not just under the rug, into hell. Through the fucking universe and down into hell. And now, you could genuinely argue, people think the numbers don't back this up, but they do. You could genuinely argue that the big three of mascot horror is FNAF, Poppy, and Bendy. Sorry, nope, that's not what I want to say. And Ban. You could genuinely argue it's Ban and not Bendy, because the numbers are there. The viewership of the Ban games is skyrocketing. Now the audience of Ban versus Bendy is very different. The reason Ban's numbers are skyrocketing and are insane, but is because of kids. So how much does that really matter? How much does that really count? I guess you could make an argument there. But, you know, like, you could make, like, I understand this person's argument that, you know, when we talk about these bad games so much, we kind of overshadow some good games that deserve it for all the effort that went into them. So that's why I'm a little mixed on it. Alright, FNAF, honestly, is like the mascot horror Harry Potter. I don't want to support it in the creator. I don't know if I really want to get into this. Support who you want to support. Don't support who you don't want to support. Everyone's free to make their own decisions. Yeah, I'm not here to give a strong take on that one. Super hot take. I like FNAF's lore as a concept, but in execution, it's dog shit. Like, none of the characters are interesting. Oh, we've been over this. Okay, well, they are saying the movie lore so far is 10 times better because the characters are actually interesting and the plot and story isn't really vague. Okay, we can work with that. I'll make the take. FNAF movie lore is better than game lore. Agree or disagree? I would agree. Because FNAF movie lore is basically just FNAF 1 to 3 lore with some elements of, like, sister location mixed in. So... yeah, I agree. I agree with that. Yeah, we've been over this. We can skip this. Probably Chapter 4 is better than Chapter 3. Fight me. I won't fight you, Joel, but I will just disagree. I think Chapter 4 is too long. Chapter 3 has, like, good sequence after good sequence after good sequence, where Chapter 4 has, like, okay sequence, boring sequence, really good sequence, boring sequence. Yeah, yeah, I just disagree. But what do you guys think? Do you think, Chapter 3 or 4 is better? Okay, we generally disagree. Sorry, Joel. Scott Cawthon is not a good writer. You know what? I'm not going to say anything about this one. I'm going to run a poll. Alright, we agree more than disagree that Scott is not a good writer. My take is that Scott is a good writer. Thank you, Strange Waffle 1, for the $2. Bendy is super poopy, gonna do the Bendy dance. You do that Bendy dance. I agree that Bendy 1 is bad, if that's what you're saying. I agree with that. But yeah, Scott Cawthon is not a good writer. I actually disagree. I think that if anybody tried to develop the Five Nights at Freddy's story the way that Scott Cawthon did, it would have turned out bad, or shaky, or mediocre. I think nobody could have written the story. If anybody tried to write FNAF the way it was written, nobody would have had a good product at the end. I think if you look at Scott Cawthon at his best, it's evident that he is somewhat of a skilled writer. If you look at individual stories in the Fazbear Frights books, individual moments of the Silver Eyes trilogy, the first 3 games on paper, the first game on paper, Sister Location on its own, FNAF 6 on its own, the movie, I think it's very evident Scott is to some extent a skilled writer. The problem is, FNAF is a story that was built up piece by piece over time in a very incoherent way, and wasn't told in a coherent way. Like, I think Scott himself is somewhat of a skilled writer. But I think he just couldn't put together a good story the way FNAF was developed. So I actually disagree. And we're very split on this one in the poll. Mascot horror will always be beaten out just for money, and I think making things like Ban Ban and such a big deal because of that is just redundant. It's sort of like, whoa, this genre meant to be I'm having a stroke over here. Whoa, this genre meant to create memorable and marketable character designs is being exploited. Kill them. Just feels silly. Of course, Ban Ban is still a legit franchise with a teeny bit of charm, but it's just that I think that part of the criticism regarding it, as well as many other games, is heavily flawed. I feel like we've talked about this enough. Security Breach is worse than some Garden of Banban games. Let's run another poll on this. What do we think of this? Security Breach is worse than some Garden of Banban games. Doesn't specify which, but just some of them. I disagree. Because I would say Security Breach is worse than every Garden of Banban game. I did not care for Smiling Critters or Rambly Raccoon. I think they both actively ruined Mascot Horror way worse than Banban or Rainbow Friends or even Security Breach. Fucking how? How? They're significantly more creative designs, and that encourages the community to be more creative. I don't get it. I guess I can kind of understand Smiling Critters because that was very merch oriented. But like, so is Rainbow Friends. I don't get it. Rambly Raccoon is such a good character, and the Smiling Critters are like pretty much all good designs. Ban has admittedly grown on me a little bit, but there's like no good designs. Rainbow Friends, again, grown on me, but not impressive designs. And Security Breach is absolutely more guilty of, sanitizing horror than Smiling Critters, Poppy Chapter 3, or Indigo Park. Okay, so we agree. We disagree that Security Breach is worse than some Garden of Banban games. Unless you guys have the same take as I do, you are wrong about that one. But that's okay. So Smiling Critters and Rambly Raccoon both actively ruin Mascot Horror way worse than other bad games. I can't imagine anyone in chat agreeing with this, but if you do, go ahead and share why. Is SB worse than Spectator? Okay, here's my honest answer to that. On a technical level, no. It is not worse than Spectator. Do I like it less? Yes, I like it less. One person seems to agree that Smiling Critters and Rambly Raccoon both actively ruin Mascot Horror worse than other bad games, such as the games listed. So, If you want to come out and say why, go ahead. But, I low-key agree, but not necessarily with those characters on their own, but what they represent. Does that make sense? I don't get it. Maybe it does make sense, but I don't get it. Alright, so there's one person here who's a bit of a black sheep that... Look at... Oh, you're look at my reply. I explain more there. Because both of them try... Oh, boy. Both of them try way too hard to sell to people that these are actually cute, marketable mascot characters instead of being horror-centric. Like, at least with Ban Ban and Rainbow Friends, you can tell it's slop and don't immediately show that they're little cartoon characters and stuff, and trying to do the whole bait and switch thing, and it feels so flat like in FNAF and Bendy. They both set you in a world with a mysterious, creepy atmosphere with no commercial or funny cartoon with the character's personality already set in, and that's also a big reason why I hate them. Like, it feels so shallow when I see fans create fan stories with these characters with already established personalities. Like, why? Like, FNAF, all we had were personal headcanons, and not to mention is always softcore corn, but that's always been an issue with these fandoms. Yeah, this isn't a good argument. This isn't a good argument at all. Especially, like, all of this. But starting back at the top, they try to sell people these are actually cute, marketable mascot characters instead of being horror-centric. That is kind of the point, and it works well because by granting you characters that provide a sense of comfort, it makes the scarier parts more scary. So I don't agree. No, fair enough. Not quite a hot take, I guess, but I love Security Breach. It's not a good game, but without it, I never would have got into FNAF, and as a result, never discovered my love of horror. Okay, and lots of reasons to like Security Breach. I won't even get into this. I won't go over it. You know, I don't like Security Breach, but you know what? If you do, for sentimental reasons or otherwise, that's all good with me. Easily the best character in that game. I agree with that. Roxy is the best character in Security Breach, and probably the best Steel Wool era character. Yeah, I think, yeah, this is fine with me. I just disagree that, like, I just don't like Security Breach. But you know what? If you found ways to enjoy it, that's fine with me. Public game's not very good and overrated. The best one's Chapter 3, but even it's decent the best. We've been over this, so we've been talking about Poppy a lot. Baldi's Bits Plus is better than Classic. I think that's a pretty cold take. I would say most people like Plus more than Classic because there's so much content in it. And, there's so much content in it, and there's so much more to play, and yes, they're very different, but I mean, I don't know. I just prefer Classic because of its ending. That's like all it comes down to. They fulfill different purposes. Yeah, but I still say I prefer one, you know? We're very evenly split on this one. Interesting. Security Breach is the best FNAF game, and Ruin is an absolute atrocity, and FNAF 2 is the worst FNAF game. You're just someone I don't care to talk to. FNAF is so overrated. To a technical degree, maybe. Okay, I saw this one. This is not the last one, but this is... Okay, I want to save this one for last. Dark Deception is better than most of the popular mascot horror and doesn't deserve so many hate. So many hate. I disagree. I disagree. I think, Dark Deception, I mean, if I just pull up my goddamn My Friendly Neighborhood, Poppy Playtime Chapter 2, Poppy Playtime Chapter 4, Zardy's Maze, if you want to count that as mascot horror, Tattletale, Baldi's Basics, Fun It's Freddy's Sister Location, Amanda the Adventurer, Hello Neighbor 2, Hello Neighbor Search and Rescue, Poppy Playtime Chapter 1, Mr. Hop's Playhouse, Bendy and the Ink Machine. Yeah, all just better games than Dark Deception. And with there being that many, I cannot in good conscience say it's better than most popular mascot horror. So, it is wrong. Disagree. Hard disagree. Alright. I don't care about this part. I care about this part. DDLC is just lame jump scares and tedious dialogue. Not a good game in the slightest. Play Ace Attorney if you want a good visual novel. What? What does this mean? Play Ace Attorney if you want a good visual novel. They're entirely different things. That's literally like saying that's comparing two entirely different things. They're so different. They're just in the same medium. They're just in the same fucking medium. Like, that's like if I said, if you like Family Guy, you should watch fucking Game of Thrones. Like, that's literally a perfectly fair comparison, because they're just mediums. They're not even genres. They're mediums. That's just such an arbitrary, stupid comparison. But also, DDLC isn't really jump scare heavy. There are jump scares, and there are jump scares, and there are, I guess, a fair few of them. But DDLC is not a jump scare heavy game. A lot of the horror comes from, like, environmental elements, subtle changes to the characters' designs, and story elements, like actual storytelling. Also, tedious dialogue. It's a visual novel. Like, what's tedious about it that isn't tedious about reading anything? It's a well-written game with well-written characters and well-written horror. Not to mention that it's a game about a literature club where there's, like, poetry to read that's also really well-written. And then again, I could just get into how good the artwork is and how good the music is and how good the fourth wall breaks are and all that shit. Yeah, this is one of the worst takes on this post. And I wholeheartedly disagree. But hey, I will put up a poll that says DDLC is a bad game. Tedious dialogue and nothing but lame jump scares. Do we agree? Or do we disagree? Alright, who picked agree? Yeah, I obviously wholeheartedly disagree with this. I think it's stupid. Yeah, I think it's just dumb. Like, opinions can be respected, but when your opinions are rooted in facts that are incorrect, I kind of don't care about your opinion. I guess we just read this. Also, both Garden of Batman and The Coffin and Andy and Lele are overhated games. People treat like they killed them wrong or something. I would agree they're both overhated, yeah. I would agree they're both overhated. Alright. Now, I think some people commented while this live stream was going on. So I'm going to quickly sort by newest. Oh, okay, we already got to those. Alright, cool. Alright, so those were your hot takes. You guys are awful, and you should all be ashamed of yourselves. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you had a good time. If you want more chill streams like this, where I ask you guys a question and we all have a little, talk together, then, let me know. Let me know if I could do more things like this. I could ask you guys more questions and just go through it. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Have a good rest of your day, nights, whatever it may be. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.